longest time. In fact, we had dozens of gospels, really. But the fact is, it wasn't until the middle of the 2nd century that anyone thought, you know what? We should put all these letters together and all these gospels together and sort out the ones we like from the ones we don't like and make a New Testament out of it. And you know where they got that idea? They got that idea from heretics, Marcion.
We didn't have the printing press. We didn't have the printing press till 1500.
Didn't say we had the printing press.
Right down.
Didn't say we had the printing press. But they got the idea to collect these letters and these books and put them into a collection of scripture. They got that idea from Marcion, and we're talking about the 2nd century now. Up till then, up to the time of Paul, before Paul, it never occurred to anybody to put these writings together. So when you say these guys were writing their gospels for different audiences, yeah, that's true. But that's true of dozens of gospels. And all of these, though they were aimed at a specific target, like Matthew, he was a Jewish writer aiming for a Jewish community. Luke was a Gentile writer aiming for Gentiles. It wasn't like they were sorting out themselves to target, and we'd have all four, and that would cover our target audience. No, every single one of them was writing the one true gospel. Luke even is right out of the gate says, so many people are writing gospels, I'm going to give you the true story. And then he besmirches his own sources, Matthew, Mark, and everybody else who's writing. And again, these are just the gospels that made the cut. They aren't including all the gospels we know about, and that's only including all the gospels that have survived to the day. So there's a world of Christian writings out there, early Christian writings, that never made it.
Well, we could start with, a lot of people don't know the history of the early Christian church.
You were preaching to the choir.
300 years, for the first 300 years of Christianity, it was considered a cult.
Absolutely. And it was a cult.
And these men sacrificed their lives.
Hang on, hold on. How do we know that? Who tells us that?
Well, we know James did because Josephus recorded that James died.
He records that a guy named James died, but if you've read my book Nailed, you'll know that James is not the James that we think of as the leader of the Jerusalem church. That's a completely different James altogether.
We also found an artifact.
That's James the Just. It's not our Jesus. In fact, you only have to read the passage in Josephus to see that that's the case. That the James in that passage and the Jesus in that passage is James the Just and Jesus son of Damnius, the brother of the high priest. It's not that should be a no-brainer by this point, because you just have to read it to know that.
We have 24,000 copies of the New Testament.
You know, we could have 24 million copies, and it wouldn't make any difference, because those 24,000 copies you're talking about are from the 12th century, 8th century, 10th century. When you want to talk about what really matters, it's not the amount of monks who are copying scripture. How many root manuscripts do we have? How many textual traditions do we have? When you start going back to that, what do we have from the 3rd century? What do we have from the 2nd century? What do we have from the 1st century? We have nothing at all from the 1st century. We have nothing but scraps for the majority of the 2nd century. We don't have complete books of the New Testament until the very end of the 2nd century. We don't have complete New Testaments until the 4th century. So there's a huge blackout period for the first 150 to 250 years of Christianity where we don't know if what we have matches the originals. We have no way of knowing if it matches the originals. And here's the thing. Let's say somebody put the original in a vault and it magically has been undisturbed until just now. If we found that manuscript and had it in our hands right now, we wouldn't know it was the original. We'd say, well, here's a weird heretical gospel.
Yes.
Well, we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which proved the book of Isaiah was accurate.
Sorry. Yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls do talk about Isaiah. Yep. And they also...
At least one book.
Well, and when you say accurate, Isaiah was written by two different people over two different times. And we can see that in the Dead Sea Scrolls too. And I don't know what that has to do with the New Testament, but there you go.
But we can trace all the New Testament books back to Jesus' inner circle.
No, we can't. No, we can't.
Yes, we can. If you look at Matthew, he was a tax collector. He talked about the temple tax in Matthew 17. He talked about the unforgiven servant in Matthew 18. And in Matthew 20, he talked about the parable of the workers in the vineyard.
And where is any of the gospel that it says
about taxes,
this was written by Matthew?
Some strange God.
Where does it say anywhere in the gospel that this was written by Matthew? And we should say Matthew Levi because hang on a second. We should say Matthew Levi because in one gospel he's Matthew the tax collector, and the other one he's Levi, and it's been put together as Matthew Levi. But in the separate gospels, they're two separate characters. And in fact, when you take out all the apostles, including the ones who are evangelists, there is no single Christian document, full stop, that agrees on who the apostles were. Not a single one. They're all put together. They're all put together by slapping together the four gospels we like, and then saying, "Well, this guy must have had 2 or 3 names," and doing it from there. You mentioned the leaders of the Jerusalem church, and I wanted to come back to that because, yeah, we do have the leaders of the Jerusalem church, and you didn't answer my question. What does Paul say about those guys? Everyone says, in Galatians he says that James is the brother of the Lord. He's Jesus' brother. Well, no, he's not Jesus' brother. He's the brother of the Lord. And what does Paul say about him? He says all those guys are false Christians. He doesn't agree with them for a minute. The whole book of Galatians, the letter of Galatians, is talking about his run-ins with these guys who he calls false Christians. How do you talk about Jesus' friends and family like this? It seems like all the arguments you're making are, well, the gospel says this, and therefore we know that. But you're not saying, well, who wrote these gospels? How do we know?
I need a break. I'm sorry. I shouldn't decide this. Oh, now I can't see anything. Sorry.